and good afternoon to all. This is Red Baron again. Today we're going to address actually kind of an obscure topic that I don't think gets enough attention. Today's topic's going to be 6 things that you should be doing before day change. So I wanted to take a look at this in a map that was fairly pertinent to watching day change. I'm specifically targeting the 500 player map. And the reason I'm targeting the 500 player map is that day change cycles begin to be very, very critical. It's not that on the smaller maps they're not important, but I find that on the 500 player map, the more routine I fall into, the more I can plan, the more I can predict, I find that I have a far better result in the game. So this is a 500 player map that Sowar is actively playing right now. I'm going to take you through what my day change plan would typically be. So I'm going to dial back from day change, and I'm going to start thinking about day change about 4 to 5 hours prior to day change. And about 4 to 5 hours prior to day change, my first step preparing for day change is planning my healing. So I'm going to come into Scandinavia, for instance. And in Scandinavia, we've recently taken out a couple AI, the last of the players up here, and I'm going to switch to my morale map. And on the morale map, it would be pretty obvious that there are areas that are good and areas that are bad for healing. But I want to draw attention to, earlier yesterday, I had a fair number of troops down here, and these were mid-60s. I know I took a capital since, so 2 days back, this was getting bad. It was sub 50 at that point in time, but I would call attention to this province right here. I have a Factory 4, I have a railway, a nice Fort 3. That province is an excellent, excellent healing location. Well, it's super common that I've got a plan, and in advance, that trip is going to take 12 hours to execute for that infantry. So what I'm typically doing prior to day change is I'm looking at areas and saying, do I want to leave my troops stranded? So for instance, at today's day change, these were coming out of this province. I was leaving an 85 and I didn't want to leave them sitting in a 45. Specifically, when we get into other areas of higher volatility, this area in New England right now, this is our active battle of the day, and probably the next 2 days we're going to be fighting this. So we'll review this momentarily. But in this area, I specifically went after, whenever I landed 2 to 3 days ago, I specifically went after what provinces can I take and bolster morale as quickly as possible. So what I did whenever I came into this area, I specifically scouted this and realized if I brought my bombers off of Newfoundland and I came into this area and I bombed and left the infrastructure, I managed to keep the harbor, the railway, and I had knocked a Factory 3 almost completely gone. So when I landed, I had a good healing station that recovered morale quickly. And every day I have been pulling troops back to that. But additionally, you'll see I have 1,200 troops just coming to shore right now. These have actually been on shore for 3 days. And daily I would make sure that I had a ship nearby, and I would pull the troops off of the ground that was hovering 40s and 50s and 60s, and I would put them back on the ship so I could maintain morale. So I've managed to keep 1,200 troops right offshore, and now that I need them, I can pull them back in. So specifically, 4 to 5 hours out, I'm looking for good ground, or I'm looking for decent ground. Now this is going to be an odd one. If I can't get the decent ground, I'll move on to enemy ground, because decent ground I would consider above 50%. If I don't have decent ground, if I don't have above 50%, I'm looking, must I stay in the 25? I don't want to stay in the 25. But the enemy ground will give me 50, and the waterfront will give me 50. And actually, it's even better if I can keep a ship nearby and couple them, and I'll offload them quickly. So this is why I'm emphasizing you need to be planning this 4 to 5 hours out, because even in this instance, it's going to take you some time to get off the dock. So if you're coming off of your ground, it should be a 3-hour offload. And if you're coming off of a harbor, it should be a 2-hour offload. So you've got to have time to get to the harbor. You've got to have time to get to the boat. I try and plan these as much as possible anytime that I can do that to save my healing. Specifically, there's another thing that you should be planning, and that is, what are you going to do with your airplanes? Your planes have to be on the ground in order for them to heal. 2 days ago, I was looking at this exact pack of bombers and fighters. At that point in time, they only had 3% damage on them. So that day, I decided I'm not going to go for any healing at all because it wasn't worth it. I was actually engaged in battle. In order to leave and come back, I was going to lose 5 to 6 hours. That wasn't worth the time for me to relocate and try and heal over, I think it was 23 points of healing. So I would always recommend have a plan for when and where you're going to heal your bombers. Be aware that if your enemy knows that you're going to be landing to heal, that you're getting back out of range so that whenever you land and refuel, that you don't become an easy target at day change. So that's step number one. First thing I do coming up on day change, I start planning my healing 4 to 5 hours ahead of time. Point number two, about 4 hours out, I'm going to go back to the political map. And about 4 hours out on day change, I start considering what provinces are in danger of revolt. You would ask quickly, well, why didn't I stay on the morale map? The morale map is handy for seeing certain things, but I find a far better filter and a far better sort if I go to my province administration tab. When I enter this, I can sort by morale. I would hope that you are aware that you can sort by morale. When I sort by morale, if I double click it, I invert that sort, and I can pick everything that's in danger of revolt. So all of these provinces are in danger of revolt, signified by the triangle with the red and the exclamation point. Now, the convenient thing is, if you've garrisoned it, and if you're into a safety zone, like Woodsville is, it's going to show up orange. So if I now close this, and I zoom back, I can actually, well, let's do this. Let's turn off the units. Okay, so now I can zoom in on the map and I can see this is the entire region that I've got issues with impending revolt. I do this about 4 hours out prior to day change. So if day change is going to happen at 2 in the afternoon, by 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking I should at least review my morale situation. I'm doing that because you need time to get your garrisons into place. There's also an interesting facet. Maybe you don't want to garrison it, or maybe you don't have troops close enough in order to cover that revolt. So there's two typical responses that we can do there. Number one, you can intentionally clear out, hoping that it either revolts back to the enemy you're going to kill, or it's going to revolt to an ally. One of the inconvenient things that may revolt to an AI or somebody that you don't want to have to attack, that's a difficulty. I really work to stay away from those. But the specific thing that I would encourage is start thinking maybe what you want to do is you want to take one lone troop and you want to garrison it, not in the city center, but 5 minutes out. Just bring it outside enough that as soon as this were to revolt, you could capture again quickly. A good reminder, make sure if you're doing that, that you do it on a safe side. If I were to take this armored car and I was going to garrison it, don't bring it to this side because if the revolt happens, you can't get back to friendly territory. I've had that happen a few times. That's a bad way to learn it. So point number one, plan your healing. Point number two, plan your garrisons and look at the morale situation on your critical territories, which leads specifically to the next one. This was the leading thing that the guys in SOAR, I asked the question in Baron's Fireside chat, what do you do to prepare for day change? Almost everybody goes to the plan my capital takedown. So planning capital takedowns. My premise on capital takedowns, and this is going to be purely from the 500 player map when I get into a large game scenario. You can see down here, there are some pre-planned capitals that are available for harvesting. When do I take those? Why do I take those? What circumstances will I and what circumstances won't I? Number one, obviously we do it in order to keep morale on revolt situations so that I don't have to worry about garrisoning all of these. I draw a line when I get into high volume production. If I haven't captured 20 maybe 25 or more provinces in the previous calendar day, or in the previous game day. I should say game day, that's important. Um, if I haven't gone beyond 20, I am not using a harvest. I'm not going to use the capital in order to cover those. Typically, if I'm moving good, I'm capturing more than 30 provinces a day whenever the game's moving along well. So I'll try to keep a supply of 2, 3, 4 capitals if I have them available, and then I'll squeeze the life out of them, and I'll intentionally slow down on a day if I don't think that I'm going to be able to take enough ground. I'll pause for a day, I'll get more troops up, I'll swap troops back for healing runs. So I plan my harvest cautiously, especially when the map gets to the point that it is now. You can see there's not many AI left. There's not a lot of easy harvest for me. So that was the third thing that we specifically set aside. There's a couple more things that are going to happen that I do in an average day change cycle, and I do these somewhere between 1 to 2 hours before day change. And you would ask, why would you worry about these being associated with day change? I don't find that day change is only about the things that happen at day change. I find it the cyclic process of getting my game on track and keeping my game on track. So I do these things just out of a rote practice. I'm going to do this because this is what I do. So these are two interesting ones. One, I confirm my resource settings, especially early game. I look at my resource incomes. So my resource incomes here, it's a moot point. It's a completely moot point. I'm so far into the game that my resource come and go is not really a big issue. But even at this point in the map, once a day, if for no other reason, I go to the stock market and I check and see, do I have anything available that's a cheap resource, like picking up some cheap oil? Now, typically, you're not getting a small, piddly amount for nothing. But today, I found a huge amount of iron sitting at about 8.5. So I come and I check my resources. I check my settings. I also check what's on the stock market. The next thing that I do consistently is I check my builds. In my builds, I find there's probably 4 or 5 times a day that I check my builds. But the province administration is a massive tool for this. I honestly feel sorry for all of you individuals that play dedicated on the mobile. I don't find the mobile app as resourceful in this. So let's look at a few things that I do specifically. First, I sort my production, and I go by what units I'm making. Then, after that filter happens, I then filter by factory. And you would say, well, what is that doing for me? The pre-filter gets them aligned by unit type. I want that, and you'll see that in a second. Then when I filter by the factory, I get a secondary filter on this, and then I can scroll down. I'll get through my enormous number of tanks and my obscene number of artillery. At the end of that list, you'll now get an alphabetic listing of all of your factory 4s that are not producing. And so numerous times a day, I'll provide this filter, but I do it in that 1 hour window prior to day change every single day, just to make sure am I building everything that I want to be building. Secondarily, while I'm filtered in this manner, I'll get to the end of my factory 4s. Then I'll begin looking, where are my constructions at? And my constructions start here. And you can see I have many factory 4s. I have harbors. And then I start scanning, what do I have undeveloped that needs to be finished in developing? So right now you can see my oil's a bit down. I'm going to focus on continuing to develop my oil provinces. Likewise, I'll also filter by resource for the same reason. I'll come up and I'll analyze how are my oil developments going, because that's one of my critical resources right now. Here I've got, this just finished the harbor. Now I'll drop in I'll drop in a railway. And I review these on a daily basis. At the very least, I go through by resource, by unit, and by building type. And I'm looking at that, categorizing how's the whole nation growing. Extremely fast at a smaller nation. On a larger scale, that naturally takes some time. So we talked about 5 hours out planning our healing, 4 hours out looking at your garrisons and your potential of revolt. Then 3 hours out, we were looking at province captures and capital takedowns. Then in the lull, about that 1 hour prior to, I review my builds. I go through my filter and my sorting. I do a lot of early game planning in that time frame, like what provinces are going to get my factories? Where am I going to put in a rail? Do I have enough wood for an early harbor? Again, a trip back to the market. I look at my resources. I look at my build queues. That's another one. I have that written down in my notes that I'm reviewing here. I always come back to my build queues in the early days. Here we are, I think we're in day 37. At this point in time, my queues actually are less full than normal only because I'm using resources hand over fist and I'm trying to conserve my oil. So I've been doing a lot of rails, a lot of harbors, moves like that. The final point on day change, and it was interesting, there was a discussion, spies. And it wasn't so much what spies, it was when. And I was surprised by an answer that Nate gave me. Nate from SOWAR. Nate, thank you for this. This was a really good tip. I asked, what do you do for spies and when do you do spies? And he had a rather enlightening response. And maybe he learned this from Cloaken. Maybe it was his own trick. His response was, I do my spies as close to day change as I can. Meaning, if I can get them done in 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes before day change, I wait as late as I can to do day change. And it intrigued me because I said, I do my spies like middle of the day. I have some time. I get to think about it. What do I want to do with them? And his comment was this. I presume that my enemy is probably going to pay, and they may be paying Goldmark, or they may have intelligence spies to figure out where my spies are at. And I'm going to move my spies right before day change, and he doesn't have the opportunity to counter spy me with intelligence. And I thought, that is a brilliant answer. I love that answer. There's a really good reason to do that. But spies, do not overlook your spies. Please, just like learning how to use your bombers or how many subs should I have to go after this pack of ships, learn to use your spies. Spies in this context, and I won't get in too deep as to who the players are over here. The fun part in spies, you can get a really good look at what's coming. You can plan things hours, if not days in advance. For instance, today in the spy network, we caught that here I have my enemy. He's literally coming up with 40 heavies, almost 1,300 infantry. This is going to be a great battle. If that stack surprised me, I would be in trouble. Conversely, knowing that he's coming, I've had time to prepare. And in that region alone, not mentioning what's coming off the ships, I have 230 artillery ready for his 40 heavies. So I just wanted to give you an overview in a 500-player game. Day change, in my eyes, day change is the time to set your tone, set your pace, set your objectives, get a chance to check in, see where everything's at. If you are not active at day change, I would highly advise you need to change that. That's going from beginner to an intermediate. But on the higher end play, there's a number of things here that are just a wealth of help and knowledge. I hope that you find this interesting. If you get an opportunity, drop in a line. Thanks to King Owen for having me on. There'll be more to follow. Thanks. This is Red Baron, and I'm checking out.